What's up, guys? Welcome to the show. This is Tyler's Talking RC. I'm Tyler C. But today I'm not here with Tyler P. He had a prior engagement, so I brought my buddy Olan in for the show.
Hello, everybody.
So the reason I brought Olan in for the show is because Olan has come from, doing the hobby as a kid all the way up to being here almost every day, helping us out, racing, doing a little bit of everything and just not being scared of just about anything in the hobby. So I figured he'd be good to maybe inspire some people trying to get in the hobby, a little nervous to come in or race or whatever. So I'm going to let Olan tell a little bit of his story and how he got into it from the beginning and all the way till now, and we'll just have a general discussion. So just sit back and have some fun, guys. Olan, I'll let you take it away. Introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. Olan Newman, RC enthusiast.
RC addict. This is not an intervention.
All right, so let me guess. Not let me guess. It all started like back when I was a kid.
Way back.
Yeah, stop. Not that. Well, yeah, kind of way back there.
60s and 50s, 60s.
Not the 60s.
Oh, all right.
Late 80s, early 90s. Okay.
All right, not too bad.
Smarty. So anyway, before I was rudely interrupted, I started off as a kid. My parents would get me model cars, kit cars, and Radio Shack, if you remember.
Vaguely, they were just going out.
They were not going out when I was a kid, but anyway, they used to have battery-operated cars that you could build, and it would take like 8 batteries to pop in, and they would just like drive and then like turn any which way they wanted.
Just turn it on and let it go, right?
Yeah, just turn it on and let it go. It wouldn't hurt you, but it would just like bounce off your foot and then go the other way or something.
Sure.
So after that got boring, I got into Tyco Traxxas. I don't know if you remember that, but it was a RC car that had tracks on both sides. It had like...
Is that the one like you could if you flipped upside down, it would drive upside down, and it flipped the other way, and like it just steered with the tracks, like a tank, right?
Right. It would stay with the tracks, but it wouldn't flip over.
You could drive it up a wall and flip it backwards, and it would drive.
It wouldn't drive backwards.
Oh, maybe it's a different one. Huh?
That was the one that came out later. But the first one that I had, it would just drive on the tracks, and you could just pretty much drive it anywhere. And
gotcha.
It would just you would control
probably
it by
bringing back some memories for somebody watching.
Probably. Especially around my age group, they probably used to have them too.
Gotcha.
And then after that, I got into the Typhon Hydro. What was it called? Hover.
The hovercraft.
Yes, the hovercraft.
I don't know the name, but I know what you're talking about.
So that thing was the best thing ever because that thing could run over anything, like dirt, grass, water, you name it, it would go anywhere. The only thing about that thing that was bad is if the batteries are going dead and you're on water, it would sink.
Right, because you use the batteries to inflate the bottom of it, right? And that had like a fan on the back?
Yeah, it had a fan on the bottom that would inflate the rubber, whatever it was on the inside, to let it hover over, God knows, whatever. And it was fun. Best thing in the world. And the thing about it was so fun, but it only lasted like 5-10 minutes and the battery would die. So you'd have to get like multiple batteries, kind of like what you do now.
Those are just the Tyco ones. They're like the 9 volts or whatever that.
Correct.
And they took like 7 hours to charge on the wall, and you drive for 5 minutes.
Right. So you have to drive. You charge it overnight.
Charge it overnight.
Yeah. So it have like a timer, and you hit the timer before you go to bed, and then it would just charge all night, and then in the morning you wake up, you would have 1 battery to go.
Best 5 minutes of your life.
Best 5 minutes of your life, and then you would like.
Times have changed.
Right, and then you would just do it all over again, but. Don't let anybody unplug the charger while you're going because like the timer would still go. It wouldn't stop the timer, but it wouldn't charge if it was unplugged and the timer wouldn't stop. So it was like one of those old.
Yep, gotcha.
So, yeah, it was the best thing, but the worst thing ever because like it would take forever to charge. Anyway, so from that, became an adult. Had a motorcycle.
Talking real motorcycles or
No. Real motorcycle. I had one.
Right from Tycos to motorcycles.
Well, okay. So it's like a 15, 20-year gap.
Took a break from RC.
Became an adult, started working, had a kid,
whole show.
Life. And then I was like, okay, let me get a motorcycle. So I had a motorcycle for a few years. I had a Yamaha FCR 600. Was my first bike that I ever bought. 96 FZR 600. And the reason I bought that because I wanted to learn how to ride a bike before I bought like a a good bike.
Gotcha.
So I got that, and I learned how to ride, and I got comfortable. So I had that for about a year, and then I bought a 2002 Yamaha R6. Was it a Yamaha R6? Yes. No, was it a... Anyway.
Deep into the motorcycle.
Yeah, it wasn't really deep. But anyway, I bought a 600 Yamaha 2002. And I was riding that for like years. Bought the whole jacket, the Yamaha jacket. Still have it to this day. Refuse to sell it.
Just in case.
Just in case. I can't fit it. But
I can't fit in it.
But I kept it. Anyway. So I had that, and I was riding that for like a couple years. And then I was riding with a group of my friends. And I stopped to text message because you can't ride and text it or take a phone call.
Right.
So I stopped to take text somebody back, and then I started to get back on the road, and then I was driving down the street, and then a car pulled out, like they could actually beat me, and I locked up, and I skid for like 20 feet, and I missed the car by like inches.
So, a little shaken up.
Oh, I was shaking. I was like, my friends like pulled around. They heard the skidding or the they heard the bike locking up, and they turned around and come back to try and like make sure I was good, because they saw the bike from where they were. They saw the car, they saw my helmet, and then my helmet disappeared. So they thought
you went down, like
right under it or hit it, and like I was trapped in between the car and my bike. So they flipped around to try and make sure I was good, and I pulled off the bike. I didn't drop it or anything like that, but I was like shaking.
Yeah.
Like, it was like the worst shake I ever had in my life. Like, my hands were like shaking really bad.
So it's time to get out the game.
Man, listen. So I was like, you know what? I'll just park it for like a week.
Relax.
A month. The rest of the summer went by, and I didn't touch the bike. And I was like, you know what?
It's over.
It's over. Because I was too afraid to get back on it, because every time I looked at the bike, that feeling came back.
Gotcha.
And I didn't like shake as bad, but I had that like, it was almost like a bad panic attack. And I was like, you know what? I got to find something else to do.
So you had a hole in your heart you had to fill.
Yeah, I had to fill it. So, long story short, after all that over, I was like, you know what? I'll just put the bike up for the rest of the year. I was like, I'm going to sell it. I'll post it. I posted on Craigslist, but I wasn't like aggressively trying to sell it.
Sure.
In the meanwhile, I bought a Traxxas Rustler from another hobby shop, and I was running that, and that's how it all started. And then
how'd you hear about the RC? You just cruising around on the internet one
day?
Yeah,
I just went on. Well, I Googled the cars that I used to have. I'm thinking like, oh, I can probably grab one of those and go.
Completely changed. Game completely changed. No more Radio Shack.
Oh no,
it's over.
Radio Shack was still around.
And we're talking what, like 10?
Almost 20 years.
No, 10 years ago from now. Like when you got your first Rustler.
Yeah, about 10 years ago.
So Rustler's been out for a while. So.
Yeah. So it was even before the Stampede. It was before the Stampede came out, because I think at the time it was just a Slash and the Rustler.
Yeah, I don't really remember what order they came out in, but yeah, it was probably one of the first.
Yeah, it was the Slash.
Slash came out first, and then the Rustler,
and
then probably the Stampede.
Yeah, but the Revo.
Don't quote me on that. I don't really know.
I know there was 3. Traxxas had 3 cars out.
Those were their main 3.
Right. It was the Revo. Oh. Nah, okay, let me pause.
They had E-Max.
For lecture cars, there was 3 cars that they had at the time. They were at the hobby shop that I went to. It was.
Oh, okay.
It was the Slash.
So they maybe just didn't have them all.
Yes, the Slash, Revo, and the Rustler. And the Slash was a truck, and I'm like, I don't want no truck. Like, I want like something that's gonna be. Thinking the Rustler was gonna be nimble, and the Revo was, I thought, too big. Because I was thinking like I'm gonna be running it on the streets and stuff, like around my house.
And the Rustler was a pretty good price too, honestly.
It is
at the time.
It was a really good price, and they had a package deal, so you could get the car, charger, battery, in a combo, and that's what I got. Because
so this is good. This is where I had Olan on, because Olan, he got into the hobby with a Rustler or Traxxas or something like that, which I know a lot of you guys listening probably did too. So as Olan's telling a story, keep in mind that Olan he just started out with just a regular Traxxas truck. He just walked into a store and bought something, and then he's in deep now. But we'll let him continue. Just keep that in the back of your mind for those of you listening.
Right. So, where was that? So the Wrestler, it was a good car to start off.
Sure.
Because you could pretty much bring that anywhere. So I would bring it to like parks, and I would have a blast with it. But then what would happen is, like, as you all know, once you start running the Wrestler in like grass or taller grass, it gets hung up, or it can't go any further. And it's only 2-wheel drive, so you're limited.
You started modifying it?
I didn't start modifying. I was like, okay, let me see if I give it more power. So then I went
modifying it.
Well, I didn't think it was modifying at the time. I just thought, like, if I bought like a LiPo battery instead of the nickel metals that it came with, it'd be more power.
Natural progression.
Right. So I was like, oh, I'll just start off small, because like I didn't want to go too crazy, because I know myself. Like, once I get like vested in something, I want to go like all in. And I was like, you know what?
No kidding.
Stop. So I was like, let me not go down that rabbit hole right away, just in case I don't like it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So I was like, oh, I'll just, and it wasn't crazy expensive to get like a couple LiPo batteries.
Mm-hmm.
So then I just started with that, started going, and then it was just like crazy. And then I was like, okay, I got to stop running in parks and stuff, because it's cool to do. And like anybody out there who runs their car in the park or a public place, like little kids gravitate to it. To the RC
usually
cars.
Grab an audience.
Right. And it's fun to do around little kids, but I'm always, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking kids don't really know how fast these cars are. They just see a toy car, and they want to grab it, or they want to, like, you know what I mean? They want to play with it themselves.
You got to be careful playing with parts, especially with, we're talking, like, basically 10 years ago now. The trucks now, you're ripping in an X-Max in a park.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, keep in mind, back then, that car still went 30 miles per hour.
Oh, it's still a good car. I'm just saying.
Yeah. So
now we were at my Mojave in the park, and one of those videos, and I saw that, and blasting that thing 60 miles an hour across the park. You got to be careful.
Right.
Right.
So I was just like, okay, it's fun, but I don't want to be responsible for taking out somebody's kid. Like, granted, I'm not doing it on purpose, but
still,
it could happen. Accidents happen. This is why they call them accidents. So I was like, you know what? Let me see if there's a place around here that I can go, because I knew about, in Southwick there was the dirt bike park, or whatever it's called. The
Wick, yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm not gonna bring my RC car there, because guys riding motorcycles, they see a little RC car,
Yeah, forget about it.
Right. How well that's gonna be.
So you're getting sick of the park, and you're like, I need to bring this thing somewhere, and
gotta find some
close quarters.
Right. And then I looked up skate parks. They were fun, but again,
just breaking stuff.
Not only that, but there's kids trying to
Same
do
deal.
tricks. So it's
like a park with jumps.
Right. And it's not made for RC cars.
Not at all.
It's fun for bashing. Don't get me wrong. Nothing against bashing, but
wasn't for you.
Nah, it wasn't for me. I needed like a track or a course or something. So I, Googled, and the only place that came up was RCMadness. I'm like, in Enfield. I'm like, I've never seen this place in Enfield. Like, I live in Springfield. I've been to Connecticut millions of times. Where is this place in Enfield that I don't know of? Because I'm like, I've been pretty much everywhere around here.
Haven't been everywhere.
No, I was not. So I started coming here, and I'm seeing the trees, and I'm seeing, like, I see this warehouse. I'm like, this is definitely not
No
it.
sign. Nothing going on.
Nothing. Well, there used to be that little wooden sign out front.
We did have a sign at that point, right? Then the town yelled at us.
Yeah, so there was that wooden sign out front, but I didn't see it at first, because that's not what I'm not thinking that's it. So I'm just going, I'm like...
Up and down the road.
Up and down the road. I'm like, okay, I hope they're not talking about this place across the street. I'm thinking about the putting range.
Oh, the driving range?
Yeah, so I'm like...
just
okay,
a park.
Right. So I'm like, okay, here we go again. I'm like, ugh. So, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, like, this cannot be it. But all I had to do was just, like, look to my right or my left, depending on what side of the street I'm on. Because it says here in the GPS, but I'm not seeing it. And again, all I see is this warehouse. So I'm not thinking that the warehouse is...
Can't be that big,
no.
right?
I'm like, this can't be that. So I'm like, okay. So I leave, go down to the gas station by the old United Bank.
Sure.
Remember the bank that used to be in? So I'm like, hey, I asked the guy, he's like, there's this place called RCMadness. Where's it at? He's like, oh, it's down this road. You just keep going. It's on your left. I'm like, no, it's not. I said, the only thing down there is this big warehouse. He's like, yeah, that's it. I'm like, no. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that's it.
In the back of my mind, I'm like, this guy does not know what he's talking about, because I'm looking at I remember the pictures that I saw on the website, and there's like...
Oh, like inside, right?
Right. So I'm thinking like...
There might have been some of the old store on there, too. Which
it
was. On Enfield Street down there, yeah.
Right. It was
so
pictures
it
from
like
the old...
plaza, right?
Right. So I was just like, this
can't
can't
be... Yeah, it hadn't been updated. We just moved here at that point.
Correct. So, and Google takes forever to...
Yeah, they still are taking forever.
So a lot of those old pictures were old, so I'm like, this can't be the place. Right. So I'm thinking it's... Anyway.
That makes sense.
Pull in, and, I walk in, I look, and I'm like, oh, shoot, this really is it. So, I don't remember what day it was, but I came in, and, I see, like, a bunch of people on the track, and I'm like, oh, this is what I want. But I'm like, this is not what I want. Yeah.
This is what I want, but this is a lot of
Yeah, this is like, okay, this is a little bit bigger pace for me. Like, I don't think I can handle it.
Intimidated, right?
Right.
Sure.
So I see the dirt track, so I just go out on the dirt track and I start putting around, and then I'm like, okay, I want to come back, but I only had like, a couple batteries, and I didn't bring my chargers because I didn't think.
You didn't know what was going on.
Right. So I go and I come back, but I only come back on Mondays when it's closed, so I can be alone on the dirt track, because I'm like, I don't want to get in these guys' ways. Like, I don't know these guys, and I don't know what the situation is.
Not to break you up, but keep in mind what Olin's saying now, because I know a lot of you guys have the same kind of feeling. So as we progress with the story, keep in mind Olan did start. He's nervous. It was a lot for him. So
yeah.
Just so keep on.
All right. So I pull on the track, and I'm just going. I don't know which way is the right way or the wrong way. I'm just going, and I'm like, I figure it out, like, okay, if the jump goes like this, I know it's not a jump, it's the back of the jump. So I'm like, okay. So I figure out which way is the right way, and I start going. I'm like, do-do-do-do, tumble, do-do-do, tumble.
Crashing everywhere.
Yeah, like everywhere. And I'm like, man, like, why is this not handling like the cars that I saw in the videos? Because on the videos, when you do like dirt track racing, these guys are like...
They're top line cars.
Right. So I'm like, what am I doing wrong? So I'm like, okay. I, instantly, and I go back home and I start researching, like, okay, what do I got to do to this wrestler to get it going? Nothing.
It's a dead-end road.
Yeah. It's
great car, but
basher.
Not a race car.
No, not a race car. You can modify it all you want, not going to happen. Don't get me wrong, not judging or saying anything about anybody out there. That's not my intention. But for me, it wasn't going to do what I had envisioned in my mind from what I saw online. So I'm like, okay. And remind you, once I see something, I want to go all in. So now I'm like, okay, right. Track. So I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna let this dirt track get me, because I always buy something to start me off, and then I get something better, so I can be competitive or not be like the rest of the guys, but just like be closer equipped. So I can,
Yeah, you're right.
So, I was like, okay, this wrestler's not going to do it. So I was like, okay, let me start looking up cars. And I'm like, looking up the prices. I'm like, these cars are going for like $1,000 plus. I'm like, okay, this is way out of my price range at the moment. Not realizing that these guys that are selling these cars are after they bought the kit, built it, put all the electronics in it. And it could have been a car that they ran last year, so they want to like get a new car to run in the next year, whatever the case may be. I didn't know all that, so I'm just thinking like these cars that's what they're going prices, and I didn't know where to buy a kit car or all this other stuff. I'm just going by what I see on online.
Right now it's all online. You haven't really spent too much time in the shop.
I've been in the shop because tumbling you break. So sure. I broke arms, cracked the body.
Just come in, grab an A-arm, and not
tires,
really chat or
something.
anything.
No, didn't talk to anybody. Sat there with my car in my hand, like looking around, like all like a new kid in school. Like like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, this is out of my element. Like, and then on top of that, like, no disrespect, but I'm the only. I don't see any other guys like myself in here, so I'm like, like.
Fair enough.
You know what I mean? So, you know, I'm intimidated by that because, like, I don't know how the reception is in here. I haven't talked to anybody. The only person I talked to was, like, Chris and whoever else was helping him at the counter. I think,
I'm not even sure who it was at the time. I don't even think it was me at that point.
It wasn't.
It was me here.
It was, he used to do the drones.
Papa?
Yes.
Joey? Yeah, so he was just helping him out. So Chris was more or less flying solo at
Yeah, he was. And he would have people behind the counter, well...
Here and there, just
right,
out. Yeah.
Just talk.
Kind of like what Olan does now.
Correct. And then you would, you know, guys like Rob would be back there.
Oh, shout out to Rinaldi if you're watching.
Yep. Maz used to be behind.
Maz, yeah.
Yep. You know, some of the guys that I got to know after, you know, but Greg.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yep. He used to be there. So it was just like all these people that I would see, you know, they were super friendly. Sure. You know, just like, hey, what do you need? And I would tell them like, oh, you know, this is what you need and da-da-da, and I would get out the door. But I never looked at like the kits and stuff that were on the wall or anything like that because I'm thinking like, from what I saw online, they're out of my price range. Like I'm not even going to ask about these cars because I'm thinking they're ridiculously priced. So I started like going on Craigslist and Craigslist to start looking at like used RC cars, and I started finding like I found an old Losi 8. I found an old Losi 8 with a Castle ESC and motor combination.
So you're playing the used market right now.
Oh yeah.
But not really knowing what you're looking at.
No,
either.
I don't know nothing about these cars.
That's risky.
Yeah, it definitely is. Especially when you're paying anywhere from like a couple $100 for these used cars that you know nothing about. You don't know their history,
right?
Whether the electronics work.
So I'm glad you brought up the used market because that's something I get asked a lot about. Which to go off a little tangent here, you got to be real careful in the used market. If you don't know what you're looking at, you can definitely get shafted, for lack of better terms.
Oh, yeah.
Not to say there's not good deals out there, but you just got to know what you're looking at and what the price is. So if you're just getting into the hobby, unless you're buying from somebody you really trust, I would refrain from the used market. I'm sure Olan might agree with me.
Oh, definitely.
Because that's a road he did go down.
And it didn't end well.
How did it?
Okay. So, I bought this Losi 8 with Castle ESC and a Spectrum radio. I'm thinking like, okay, I'll be good to go. And the guy was just like, oh, everything's included. You know, the charger, everything is there. Everything's in it, and I'm eating it up.
It was perfect. That was the best sale. Oh my god.
He saw rookie or newbie.
Played.
My goodness. So you know we're messaging back and forth, and I'm like, okay, cool. You know, I get out of work
in love.
Oh man, I'm like, finally, I'll be able to compete. I'll be like those guys in the videos. Like, oh, I'm good. Sucker. So I tell the guy like, hey, I can meet you so and so. So we meet in the Holyoke Mall because I'm like, I'm not meeting this guy at his house or anything like. Because I'm like,
right, still it's Craigslist deal.
Exactly. And you hear about those Craigslist killers and all this other stuff.
Oh, I'm getting Craigslist killer.
Listen,
low C8.
You never know. So
that's not wrong. Pro tip.
Right.
You can never be too careful.
So I'm like, public place. I'm like, let's meet at the Holyoke Mall. So we meet at the Holyoke Mall. He's like, hey, everything's in here like I told you. The car, the charger, the batteries, everything good to go, blah, 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 blah. So I bring the car home.
Let me ask you something. Did you test the car while you were there?
Again, we met at a public place.
So you didn't?
Again, we met at a public place. I was afraid of Craigslist killer.
Always test the car.
I was afraid of the Craigslist killer. I didn't want no problems. Public place.
Just grabbed it and bounced.
I grabbed it and go. And I was so paranoid, I didn't even stand next to my own car. I stand next to somebody else's car. So I parked my car like 2 cars behind.
Wow.
And I parked, and I stood on another person's car.
I've thought about this all day.
Oh, listen. My mind,
That's not bad, honestly.
It's not, but I overthink everything. So I was thinking like this guy would probably rob me and then take my car and go, whatever the case.
It's definitely possible.
So I only had the cash that I was gonna give him in my hand. I didn't have my wallet, and everything else was locked in my car. And I stood on another person's car, so he thought it was somebody else's car. So, I'm looking in the, everything's there. I give him the money. He's like, you good? I'm like, yeah, everything's fine. I'm just going to, look it over before I go. This is my first time. He's like, oh, yeah. If you have any questions, call me. You got my number. I'll help you out. So I'm thinking, like, okay, this is a solid guy.
Perfect transaction.
Everything is good. Man, listen.
Go downhill fast after that one.
Now, like you were saying, be careful when you buy used stuff. And I should have said, hey, can we test it? Can we do it, make sure it works? But the guy was so super friendly. He was answering all my questions, everything. And we were talking we talked for a few days before we actually met to buy the car because, we both work, so,
right.
Schedule. So we were talking, and he would get back to me really quickly. I'm not saying he'd be like, oh, as soon as I send a message, he'd respond right away, but it was like,
reason.
Right. So I'm like, man, this is a good, solid guy. He's like, hey, you can call me, any questions, I'm good, da-da-da-da. So I'm like, all right, cool. I'm looking over the box, I'm excited. In my head, I'm like, okay, now I can be like those videos. Boom. So I get the car back home, and I go to charge it, and I'm like, whoa.
What was up?
The adapter that was on the battery, I didn't have a charging port for.
Different connectors?
Different connectors.
Okay.
So the charger that was in the box wasn't
for the car.
Wasn't for the car. It was just a charger that was thrown in it. It was some no-name brand charger with some cords and just put up in there.
Little switcheroo.
Oh yeah. So I didn't know what I was looking at, but at the time it was a Dean's connector and you remember those white connectors? It was like a square and a half a circle with
to my plug.
Yes.
Wow.
So it was one of those. And a Dean's, and the battery had Dean's plugs on them, but they weren't red. They were kind of like black smoked. Like they kind of shorted out.
Oh, like they had smoke on them.
Oh, they had smoke on them.
Oh, like they were plugged in
correctly.
Oh,
they were done.
They were done.
Yeah.
Not good.
So I'm like, okay, whatever. I'll just clean it up. Maybe, I'm like, well, I'll probably just clean it up, but I'll be good. No. The batteries weren't for the car. They were just some batteries that were just thrown in there. So, not knowing what I was looking at, it was like 2-cell batteries.
Yeah.
And the car called for 4-cell. 3 to 4 cell.
Sure.
Depending on the gearing or whatever, you had to use like 3-cell. Because the ESC and motor combo, you could use it at 4-cell, but you could possibly burn it out or whatever like that. It was, oats. It was I don't remember what it was, but I remember it was a Castle setup. Could have been like a...
Was it even the right one for the car?
It was an 8-scale ESC and motor combo for Castle. But it wasn't what the guys were using for racing.
So was the car itself good?
The car itself was good. It was beat up from the bottom, but he kind of explained that. He was like, hey, it's a dirt track.
Sure. So the car was good, but you got the wrong batteries and wrong So you couldn't really use it.
I couldn't do anything with the car. And on top of that, the remote that was for the car wasn't for the car.
Not the right remote.
Not the right remote. And there was no receiver.
Couldn't even use... So if you had asked to test it, you wouldn't have been able to, and you would have found this out.
No. And on top of that, like I said, the batteries were smoked out. So anyway... I was like, okay, I got screwed, and I'm out. I don't remember how much it was at the time, but...
A few $100 anyway?
No more than 4, but I was out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'm like, okay, let me call this guy out. He's like super helpful.
Forget about it.
The number you have dialed is not in service.
The phone doesn't even exist anymore.
Oh my goodness. So I go up on Traxxas. I'm like, okay, I still have my emails. The post has been removed.
Gone. Wiped it. It's not his first rodeo.
No.
So, moral of the story.
Oh, I got screwed.
Also, so you just got to know what you're looking for used cars.
Oh, yeah.
And if it's your first one, just don't do it, man.
It's not worth it.
It's not worth it.
It's not.
And also, if you guys do want to meet up with somebody, you can meet them here.
I learned that later.
I have no problem with that if you want to meet them here, and I'll give you the car a look over and tell you. I'm not gonna get involved with the deal. That's not my thing. But
no.
If you're like, hey, does this battery go with this and this, and I'm like, no, I'll tell you what you need, but I'm not gonna get involved too much. But if you do want to meet somewhere, you can meet here, whatever.
Right.
But yeah, anyway, so you got had on your
I
used.
got had. So I went back to the previous hobby store that I went to. I was telling the guy and the people there. I'm not gonna mention any names. Not gonna say what city or town or nothing. But I felt.
Well, it didn't get taken care of, basically.
Not only that, but they just made me feel like the biggest idiot in the world.
So they made you feel dumb about what you did.
Yeah, because they were like, "Oh, you should have just came here. We'd have did it. I'm like, it's my, I'm not even a year into the hobby. Like, I'm just trying to get into it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's not how you gain a customer. Or like you're not good customer service.
Yeah, I might bust you up a little bit for your decision, but at the end of the day, I'll be like, well, you need batteries and you need a radio,
right.
So this is what I got. If you want to, let's figure it out.
You're not going to talk down to the customer.
No. I mean, we've all made bad choices.
Right. You know what I mean? And like, now, I can be heckled. And, I can take a good joke like the rest of them. But it wasn't a joke. The guy just, like, they just made me feel like,
right.
Like crap. And you could have been like, hey, you made a bad choice, but we'll help you get to where you need to be. This is what you can do.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, like, oh, come on, what are you doing, man?
Right.
What were you doing? What were you thinking?
Right. And there was none of that. Like, beat me up for the stupid mistake that I made because I should have just bought what you were trying to sell me in the beginning, but
you didn't.
I didn't because at the time, I didn't have the budget to sync what you were trying to sell. Right. Now, if you'd have said, like, hey, you can do it little by little, just buy the car first, then buy the battery, but it was all, this is what you need to get it now. Like, it's not how it works. Like, not everybody has the...
But it does fall on you a little bit because you were a little nervous to ask and talk about it, which you shouldn't have been.
Well, not here.
Well, we're talking about the other store. I guess I couldn't say your experience what it would have been over that wherever you were, but had you... I'm picturing that you were here, but you weren't. You were somewhere else.
Right.
But,
so.
All right. So I'll let you keep going.
Yeah. So the thing about it is, at the other place that I thought I had gotten, built up a rapport. I've been a
few times, right? That's where you bought the Rustler and stuff?
That's where they bought the Rustler. So I'd go back with questions and be like, oh, do this, da-da-da.
So they knew you a little bit.
Right. I thought, but.
Apparently not.
No.
Didn't care.
No.
Okay.
So I was just like, okay, I'm done with this place. But I was like, oh, wait, the place that went to the dirt track. There's guys in there, like, how about I go and ask? So, I brought my car.
The one you had bought used, you brought here, right?
I brought it here. And, Chris pretty much went through it and was like, no, that's not going to work. You need this. And, he was just like, he pretty much did what I was expecting the other place to do. Now, granted, the only thing I bought here was, like, parts and... He didn't know me from a hole in the wall, but he made me feel...
You're essentially a new face.
Right. And he made me feel like I was one of the customers. Like the long-time customers. Just like, no, dude, this is what you should do, and da-da-da. And he was just like, well, there's this kit up on the wall. You could do that. And I was like, well, that's not really what I can afford. And then he was like, well, we do sell used cars, too. And he was like, these are cars that I either take in or whatever the case may be.
That we think are worth selling.
Right. And so he was like, well, you could do this, and this would get you going. I'm like, okay. And then I think I bought another Losi, but it was a newer Losi.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a newer Losi. It wasn't as old as the one I bought, because the one I bought was like one of the first ones, and it was clapped out, and you couldn't get parts for it.
That's another thing buying used. You got to know how old these things are, because parts get discontinued if they're too old.
Right. So there was no parts available in the store. Like, it could be ordered, but I'm not gonna,
You're gonna wait around for a week and a half trying to find this old part and blah blah blah.
Especially when I could buy something a little
newer and we have them on hand.
And it's almost like certified, kind of, because went through.
RCMadness certified pre-owned.
Right. So you guys like not verify, but you just like make sure.
We try not to let people when people are selling things, either they're selling them through themselves or we're selling it. We make sure they're honest about what they're selling and not. And I'll be honest too. If somebody brings their old car and sets it on the counter, I'm selling this, and someone asks me about it, I'll be like, that car's really old and you can't get parts very well for it. I'll tell you.
Right.
I mean.
And that's good to know
because it's only going to come back and bite me later.
Right.
So
and
I'm honest with you.
Right, and that's good to know because when you're buying these cars, you're spending your hard-earned money and you're hoping you get to use it you know, granted, it's used. Nothing lasts forever. You know, it's there's no guarantee with used stuff.
Right.
There's no guarantee with new stuff, but with new stuff, there's warranties.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Right. So at the time, if you're running an ESC or something and it just, busted out, you send it back, a couple dollars. They'll fix it and send you it back, or they'll email you and say, hey, it can't be fixed. These are your options, which is good because you don't feel like you're losing out on the money that you spent. So, fast forward, I buy the used car. I get set up with the charger. I go home, charge it up. I'm still too intimidated to come down and run when you guys are open. So I'm running on Mondays and then Sunday nights after everybody's gone. So I'll come back. I'll watch the races, but I'm not going to participate.
Right.
Because I'm like, one, I know I'm not as good as those guys because when I don't even go on the driver's stand. I was going on the little pit lane and standing on that, and I was tumbling like I wouldn't even get down the straight and I would tumble. So I'm not going up those stairs to come back down in 2 seconds. Like
walk back and forth.
Not doing it. So I would just do that, getting that down, and then I was just like, just trying to get used to the car. And what I didn't realize is, even though you're buying a used car, there comes maintenance. And with the dirt cars, you get rocks, you get dirt, and I was running the car and it kind of like wouldn't go like it was supposed to. I'm like, what's going on? I didn't know what I was looking at. I'm just looking at the car. I bring it in and Chris like, oh, you just got a rock caught in the center diff. He takes a screwdriver, pops it out, and you're good to go. I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Didn't make me feel like an idiot. He just said, "Yeah, this is what the problem is," and boom. And then I'm out there running, and then I see like some of the other guys, Steve.
No, I don't know. It's your memory, no man.
No. He.
Oh, Rockwood?
Yes.
Oh, Steve. See, I do know. Oh, jeez.
Yeah, so he was out there, and he was like, oh, just do this. So I didn't realize, maintenance setup was so important.
Yeah, so now you got yourself a legit car, so now you got to start taking care of it.
Correct. So he's like, oh, the reason your car is not handling well, it's like a real car. So if like your camber and your toe is off or whatever.
Talking about just general setup. Maintenance and
so he was like,
yeah, that's cool.
He was, he put the car on the table. There was a table out there. He put the car on the table and he had this tool look like an L. I'm like, what the heck is this? And he puts it up and he takes out a wrench and then he adjusts it. Mind you, I have no tools. All I have is a car and a charger. That's it. So he puts it on the table, he takes out this tool that looks like an L. I'm like, okay. And then he takes out another tool and, starts adjusting it, and then the wheel starts going in a little bit. I'm like, oh. I'm like, I can do that. So I'm like, all right, cool. He's like, do you have this tool? I'm like, I don't have the L thing. Again, he's telling me what it is, but it's not registering in my head what it is. So I'm like, I don't have that L thing. All right, I don't have that. He's like, oh, if you're going to be doing this, you need to get some tools. I'm like, well, I don't really know what I'm getting. And he was like, oh, I have an extra one here. And he just gives it to me. I'm like, okay, thank you. And he's like, go on the stand, and then I'll watch you. And, I'm like, I'm not going up there. Like, I keep fumbling. He's like, no, if you flip, I'll go flip you. I'm like, oh, you'll do that? He's like, yeah. So I'm like, all right. So I go on the stand, and I'm up there, and I'm like, driving slow. And he's like, all right, take the...
hit the jump.
Yeah. Like,
hit it like you mean it.
Right. Not in those exact words, but, So I'm hitting the jumps, and, you hit the jump not knowing that you got to keep the throttle because it's 4-wheel drive.
You can control it in the air.
Right. So I'm hitting the jump,
okay.
And it's nose diving, and it's jumping, like, straight up in the air, flipping. And he's like, all right. So when you're in the air, let off the throttle, but not all the way. I'm like, okay. that's impossible because the car is only in the air for like 2 seconds. So before you know it, it's on the ground. Like, that is not possible. He's like, yeah. So I'm like, whatever. He comes up, he grabs the remote, and he's just like, dude. And he's like, oh. He's like, so.
Killing it.
Yeah, with my own car. So I'm like, okay, something ain't right here. Like, how come this car is acting this way for this guy, but when I was driving it, it was doing none of that.
This is when Olan found out it's not the car. It's the driver.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely the driver. 100% driver. Well, take it back. 95% driver.
Okay, give yourself 5%, a little credit.
5% car at the time. So, not knowing any of this stuff. So, yeah. So, you know, I watched him do a couple laps, and he does really good. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this. So, I'm going. I'm not doing nothing that he just did. I'm like, okay, something ain't right. So, you know, he pulls me over. He's like, hey, this is what you got to do. You know, he's like, you can't gun it right out the gate. You know, you got to feather the throttle because it's dirt and the tires will spin. And it's like, unless you got a ton of money to replace these tires, you're going to want to take it easy till you know what you're doing. Again, not realizing all the things that go into...
The things that are wearing out when you're just beating on it?
Oh, yeah. You know, so I'm thinking, you know, these guys use it. It's like, I'm thinking it's like regular car tires or like a bicycle tire. They last forever as long as you don't get a nail in it or a puncture. Well, not forever, but they wear down, but not as quickly. So, you know, I'm on the dirt track doing my thing, and I'm like, okay, I make one jump. I'm like, okay, you know, starting to get cocky. So I'm like, I'll go a little faster. No. Does not work.
What happened?
Oh, I cased it. And the car just, like, tumbled for, like, ever. And it kept tumbling. And then it tumbled, and it was done. So what happened was, from all the tumbling, I bent the front drive shaft. Mm-hmm. And it was, like, bent.
Like a banana.
Oh, yeah, it was. So I'm like, okay, I don't got money for this right now. So I'm like, all right. I packed the car up, and he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, it's bent. He's like, unbend it. I'm like, okay. In my head, I'm thinking, does this guy not remember the conversation? That L thing, I didn't have. The camber wrench, I didn't have. So how the hell do you expect me to unbend something when I have no tools? So he's like, all right, bring me the car. I bring him the car. He's over there hammering it out. I'm like, okay. I'm thinking in my head, like, hey, guy, if you break this, it's on you, because, listen.
It's hammering the drive shaft
right.
straight?
So he hammers it straight. Not completely straight, but enough where
straight enough.
All right. Enough where I can keep going. Now, mind you, I'm not paying attention to this, but I draw in a crowd.
You're driving?
No. So, the two of us on the track, there's other people watching us on the track.
Sure.
I'm not realizing who they are. And it was, I think, Maz and Rob, because they came to practice. So I'm like, okay. So when I realized that they're there, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna stop. And they're like, no, keep going. You can run with us. I'm like,
no way,
not happening. So I'm like, no, you guys go. I'm good. I'm just gonna call it a day, whatever, because the batteries are dead. They're like, oh, you can use my charger. I'm like, no, I gotta go. I'm making all the excuses in the world to get out of it. And
you don't want to drive.
I do not want to drive with them, but they're not having it. So I'm like, all right, whatever. So we charge up my battery. I go back out there. I'm running with them for a little bit, and I'm seeing these guys. I do like one jump. They've done the track once, and they're right behind me, passing me again. So I'm like, how are these guys so fast? But I'm too intimidated to ask them these questions. In my mind, all these questions that I'm thinking in my head, but I'm too scared to ask them. So I go back home, and I start in Google, looking up this.
Google-a-thon.
Oh man, I'm going crazy.
Deep into RC setup.
Deep. So I'm watching this guy's RC this guy's video, another guy's video. At the time, YouTube was there, but it wasn't as
It was early.
It was early in YouTube, and a lot of the videos. Now, when you search something, everything in that category pops up. But back then, you still had to go through pages and pages. When you search RC car, car would be the main focal point, and it would just be cars. So you would be scrolling through
It's progressed quite a bit.
Right, a lot. I'm not trying to date myself, but I'm just saying.
You already did.
Oh yeah. So I'm going and I'm like, these guys are helpful, but they're not helpful because the questions I have are not what they're addressing. They're addressing these newer cars that they're just putting together and running. I have an older car that's, a couple years behind with older equipment, and they're running like brand new this, that, and the other, and it's not what I have. So I can't. It's not making sense what I'm watching to what I actually have. Again, I'm too scared to ask Chris or these guys. And, Steve, he just, out of the kindness of his heart, he just came over and started, helping me because I guess he was like, this kid is terrible.
This kid needs help.
Yeah. It's bad. So he's like, I don't know if he wanted to get out on the track and he was like afraid that I was going to take him out or anything. But long story short, he was a really nice guy. And he just like, helped me that day. And he didn't have to do it. He was fixing my car that I couldn't fix myself. And, he took the time out of his day to do that. And, it's not to be sentimental, but that means a lot. You know what I mean? Because it's like,
right.
He could have been like,
could have just straight up ignored you and not done anything.
Right.
Or he could have called you an idiot.
Yeah, and then get off the track,
Yeah.
And the pause in the story, I see that now.
Right.
Like, I see people, like, treating the newer people like they're scum.
So people that are listening that have been in the hobby for a while, like Olan saying, he was the new kid, and Steve had been in it for a while, and he just came over and helped Olan. Now, as we keep going here, Olan has become said person that can help people. So just keep that in mind. And we all started at a certain point, and now that we've progressed pretty deep in the hobby, there's no reason we can't help somebody that's nervous just to ask the questions. But yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah,
it's just like it takes like 2 seconds to be like a nice person. Like, I'm not saying you have to give them your equipment or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. But like, if you see somebody struggling, like, just say, hey, you could do this. But don't talk down to them or make them feel like they're not wanted, because they're not gonna come back. And the only people that are gonna suffer is the hobby. So if people start like disappearing from the hobby, it's gonna eventually die down. And that's what we don't want. So, like, I always keep that in the back of my mind when I see somebody, they'll see me and be like, hey, I got a question. I'm not going to lie, I am human. So if I have, like, a bad race, I might have a little bit of an attitude. But I'll be like, I'll go back to the person like, hey, I apologize if I came off a little snippy. They're like, oh, no, you're good. But I'm like, try this. You know what I mean? Like, you could do this, and this might help you out.
I'm like, we're not always in the best mood. I get that. No. I get that.
And I always tell people, like, listen, I'm no pro. Far from it. I'm just I'm not gonna say I'm a newbie because it's been like 10 or so years. Yeah, I moved on.
You're a brown belt.
Yeah, I don't know about brown. I think I'm like, what comes after white? Yellow?
Yeah, maybe yellow.
Yeah, I'm still yellow, I think.
Well, you could be brown belt.
Yeah, no, yellow. Definitely.
Okay.
Did you see my racing Tuesday night? I'm definitely yellow.
I wasn't talking about racing. I was just talking the hobby in general.
I'm still yellow.
You might still be a white belt in that.
Definitely white belt.
That's beyond the point.
Oh, okay. Anyway, so yeah, so he helped me out, and he didn't have to, and that meant a lot. So I brought my car home. I came back, and I started like watching more races and try to get like comfortable, what was going on. And then I started like asking questions. So I started like asking.
You stopped being a little nervous at this point.
Correct.
And started asking questions.
Because like there's a saying, a closed mouth don't get fed. So if you don't ask,
you ain't gonna know.
You ain't gonna know. So, and again, what I was telling you is, what you find on YouTube or online, it might not help your situation because it might not be pertaining to what you have. So it's
there's a lot of variety and a lot of combinations.
Correct.
Of things.
And for a new person coming in, the car might look the same, but it's not the same, because like take for instance the Associated B63. It looks like the B61, but it's completely different. You know what I mean? Because it looks the same, but it's not the same.
Quite a few different parts.
Right.
And stuff like that. Sure.
And on top of that, if you even go back a little further, the one before the B5, everything was on the other side.
Yeah.
So like that totally changes. And then it was that the one that was rear motor?
No, before was rear motor.
Right. So a lot of things have changed, but you're buying stuff used that you can afford.
And you don't know how old it is. It goes back to knowing what you're buying used.
Exactly.
Right.
And you might think it's comparable to what they're running now, and it's
not.
It's not.
Yeah, you're right. So at this point, you've got your car. You started doing the research, and then you're less nervous to talk to people. Start talking to people.
Yeah.
Have you come? The shop. Have you come into the shop and started talking to people in there?
No, the only I only come in and go straight to the counter. I don't talk to anybody.
Were you talking to people at the counter at this point?
The only person I'm talking to is whoever's behind the counter, based on what car I have.
So you haven't branched out and asked them about other things?
No, I haven't asked about other kids or nothing. I just strictly what I have.
You played with your car and you're getting better.
I just keep it because I figure like I'm not gonna buy something new until I get comfortable with what I got.
Okay.
And then the more I start running, then I start realizing like censored, non-censored.
Picking up little things along the way.
Correct.
Camber and
right.
Throttle control, blah, 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 blah.
Different tire selection. So I'm thinking like big nubby spike tires are good. They're not.
Depends on the track conditions and all that fun stuff.
Right. So it's not always the best thing. And those spiky tires run out really, really quickly. So I was thinking like, oh, I'll just rotate them. You can't rotate them. They're four-wheel drive. They're all around the same. But I was thinking like, oh, the front spins a little bit more than the rear. So, if I do this and that, the car's not gripping and hooking. And so, like I said, I was coming to the races, and then I was like, notice like at the end of the races, there'd be a bunch of like tires in the trash. I'm like, these are still good
tires. Free tires.
I'm like, yeah, free tires.
Oh my God, they're just
full
giving
set.
these things away.
I'm like, full set. So I'm like, okay.
I went over there digging in the dumpster after.
I have no shame.
No shame.
Well, I do. I waited till everybody left.
I did it in the dark with a flashlight.
Well, I didn't do it in the dark because like there was trash cans all over the place, and you would just see like tires, like sets of tires. Sometimes it'd be like 2, 4, 3, whatever the case may be. But I'm like, it's free. I'll run whatever. I don't really care. So I would just like make sure I would come after a race because I would know it's free tires after a big race.
Free tires.
Yeah. So I don't know what I'm doing, but so I'm like, yeah, I'll save some money. Go dumpster diving. Like, who cares? Start taking tires out of the trash, and and they're still good. They still got good tread on them. And then I start looking at them, and I'm like, there's writing on this left, LF, rear, RR. I'm like, oh, depending on where they running them, they're marking them. So it's the front left, front right.
They get serious.
Right. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm like, I never understood why they were doing this, but I would see that on a bunch of these tires. So I'm like, okay, whatever. And I would just like take them and not realizing that some of these tires had directionals. So you could only run them in one direction, and it would either grip better or they would just be terrible. Before I was just throwing them on, not realizing this. So then, I start, and then I ask the counter, I'm like, hey, why do people write on the tires? And then that's when they explain, oh, it's depending on the tires, some rotational.
So you're talking to people at the counter, building a relationship up at this point.
Correct. I'm asking questions.
You're finally asking some questions around here.
It's almost been a year. It's been like a year later, and now I'm starting to like ask questions and like
get more comfortable.
And then I'm like, okay, but mind you, I'm still a limited budget. Now, mind you, I still have a young kid at home, so I can't go out crazy spending, and I got to be somewhat responsible. So, I got to do things on a budget. So I'm like, putting away a couple dollars here, a couple dollars there. And then I'm like, you know what? I really need to sell this motorcycle.
Goes back to the motorcycle.
So I'm like, all right, I put it on Craigslist, try to sell it. And I try to put it for what I bought it for. Now, granted, it's a couple years later. It's not worth as much. More miles, it probably needs new tires, all this other stuff. And I'm like, I'm not going to put money in it. Because every year you're buying, not every year, but you want to get like newer tires because you start to get that wear on the rear tire, especially when you're doing stupid stuff like burnouts and stuff like that. So,
wait, what?
Yeah. Not that I was a burnout person. I was too afraid to do that too. But anyway, because I always see like when people do burnouts wrong.
Bro.
Oh yeah. I once saw this guy doing a burnout, like he was in front of a crowd. He was killing it. He's like, rocking the wheels side to side.
We're gonna have to start the motorcycle podcast next.
Oh yeah. So he was killing it. I'm like, man, like, and the crowd is like, crowd of people like going crazy, and his foot slips, and it drags him.
Game over.
Oh, game over. It was bad. The bike hit the curb. Bike went flying this way, and then he went flying even further because the bike took him, and he just went shh. Granted, he landed on like
Olan side story about wheelie. Burnouts. Burnouts.
Mind you, he landed on like dirt, but
you're lucky.
Oh, he was
wow.
Somewhat lucky because the ground still hurts. So he broke some. I think he broke something, but he hopped up like nothing was wrong, but. It was that embarrassed hop up. When you ever do something.
Adrenaline hop up.
Yeah. But I know it caught out to him. But his bike was done. Like, the turn signal, the mirror, just gone. And I think the rear rim was bent from when it hit the curb. So it was
You didn't get no money for that one?
No.
So did you end up selling it or what?
Yeah. So, long tangent, sorry. So I ended up selling the car. I ended up selling the bike. I get like $2,000 for it. I'm like, okay.
Time to get that nice RC car, baby.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Give me that top shelf kit right there.
No.
What?
That's not what happened.
It's his style now,
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know what.
Life. Remember I told you.
Oh yeah, we're still living life.
Yeah. Young kid. So I'm like, all right, got to be somewhat responsible. So I'm like, all right, let me, get him some clothes, do this, put some money aside. After I do all that, I'm like, okay, I only got like a couple $100. I'm like, this is not going to work. Because in the back of my mind, I know what it costs to build a new car. I don't know how to build a car at this point.
Oh, you've never built a car?
Never built a car. So, a year or so later, after selling the bike, I finally save up some money. I buy an associated 8-scale buggy. RC8.
Whatever. RC8 point something at that point.
Point something, right? So I'm like, okay, it's in the winter. So I'm like, all right, I have all winter well, not in the winter, but yeah, it's in the winter.
Off season.
Right. Spring's coming in a couple months. So I'm like, okay, like I got some time. So I buy the car, plus I get my taxes. So I'm like, okay, I can spend a little bit extra money because it's not really money coming out of my paycheck. It's, even though you're supposed to put money aside, I'm like, you know what, whatever. I don't really do much for myself because I spend, take care of my kid and the bills and family, whatever like that. So, responsible. Try to be. So I'm like, all right, I'll use some of this money plus what I saved and I'll buy a kit. So I bought the Associated. So I buy the Associated. I start putting it together, and then I stop because I'm like, what's the point of putting it together when you get to the part where you have to put the servo, the thing that makes it turn. I don't know what it is at the time, but I'm like, the thing that makes it turn. I had the old one for my car, and I'm like, I don't want to put that one in there because it's...
So you needed more components, basically. You're building it, needed more stuff.
Right.
So you came down to the hobby shop, you asked a bunch of questions, and you bought it all.
No, that's not what happened. So, I knew what it cost to buy a brand new one, but I still couldn't afford it, even with the money that I saved up and from, the extra money that I thought for my taxes. So I'm like, okay. I'm a little bit more knowledgeable on what not to do. So I'm like, hey, let me go back to Craigslist,
We're back on Craigslist.
We're back on Craigslist.
We got it figured out, though, now.
Yeah.
We're professionals now.
Somewhat. So I go back on Craigslist, and I start, looking for, things, and I find a servo that I could possibly use. And,
someone was just selling a single servo?
Well, they were selling, I don't know what they were doing, but they were selling RC parts.
All right.
So they had a Futaba. No, was it Futaba?
Don't hurt yourself.
Yeah, definitely hurt myself. Anyway, they had a servo that they were selling, and I was like, oh, I could buy that and put that in the new car that I'm building, and then I'm like, well, then I'll save up and then I'll buy like the electronics. Mm-hmm. And at the time, Tegan was like
Tegan was pretty hot.
Was a ticket. So I'm like, I can't afford to buy brand new, but this guy was selling a old RX-8 ESC. So I'm like, oh, well, if I buy the two, can I get a better price? And he's like, yeah, I can do a package deal. And he's like, da-da-da. And I'm like, well, if I save a couple more dollars, I can just buy it brand new. He's like, well, it's technically brand new. I just had it. I just ran it 1 year. 1 season, but, da-da-da. And I'm like, well, it's not brand new. So why am I going to pay brand new prices or close to it when I can just save my money and buy a brand new one? He's, haggling for a little bit. And then I was just like, hold on. If he's willing to negotiate a lower price, what's wrong with this thing? So I'm like, okay, do you mind, showing me, making sure it works? Oh, I don't really have a car that's built, to put it in. Well,
at least you're asking to test things at this point.
Right. And I'm like, well, the car that you're selling, can you put it back in that and, and let me see it work? Oh, it's going to take me some time. I kind of want to leave it apart and sell it. Well, I'm like, well, until I see it working, I'm not going to buy it because I already got shafted once. I'm not going down that road again. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not, Daddy Warbucks over here. I got it like that. So in the back of my mind, I still got a kid and a girl at the house. Like, she can be like, hey, where's all this extra money going? Like, you're spending money that we don't really have to be spending. Like, what are you doing? So I'm like, I can't really go down that hole again because I never told her the first time. And granted, I was able to sell my motorcycle and recoup some of my money that I took out of savings to spend, but I'm always thinking, like, one step ahead. Like, what if I get laid off?
So did you end up with it?
Nope. I didn't buy it because you didn't
test it.
He couldn't test
couldn't prove it worked.
Couldn't prove it worked.
So you passed. Good move.
I did pass.
It was a good move.
It was a good move, but in the back of my mind, I'm beating myself. I'm like, you idiot. What if it worked and you miss out on a good deal?
So how did you end up acquiring all these electronics?
So, I decided to save up my money and wait.
Save the money and you bought them new?
I bought them brand new.
And it worked out?
It did. So, it took me a little bit longer. So, I started building the car in, like, February, March, or whatever. So, I had to wait till, like, April, May before I could, finish building it. I'm like, hey, this is going to be my birthday present to myself. My birthday's in May. I had this car done, and this will be my birthday present. So, I put the car all together, bought all the electronics from here, put everything together, ran it, bought a newer Spectrum radio.
Living large.
Oh, yeah. I'm riding the hog right now. So, I put this car together, and I go to run it, and the car is not running. It's not moving when it's just like locking up. I'm like, what do I do? I'm wrong. Yes, you know where I'm going with this.
Shout out to Carissa.
Oh, yeah. She'll remember this one.
I already know.
Yeah. So the car's not running, and I can't figure out why. So I bring the car back in here. I'm like, hey, the car's not running. Da-da-da. At this time, I started talking to people, and they kind of know who I am by now because I'm coming out around a little bit more.
Well, it's got a little bit of a little street cred, right?
A little bit of street cred. So the car's locking up. It's not moving, and I'm like, what am I doing wrong? And, I come in, and there's a nice lady working behind the counter. She takes the car, she's doing these little things, and then she's like, something ain't right here. I'm like, yeah, I know. And, she sees that everything is somewhat new. ESC and motor are new, but not all the other electronics are new. She's like, something ain't right. So she puts it on the bench. She starts taking it apart, and she's like, you put the diff in backwards. I'm like, no, I didn't.
No, I didn't.
I grabbed the book, and I'm seeing, look. She's like, yeah. Look at the picture again. And I'm looking at the picture. I'm like, yeah, that's how I put it in. Like, in my mind, I'm thinking, like, okay, lady. I know what I'm talking about.
I did nothing wrong.
Yeah, I followed the instructions. I did it right. Not realizing that above the picture, there's a little asterisk that says, "This is the reverse view of what you're looking at," or something like that. You gotta, yeah. So she takes it, turns it around, puts it in, car rolls. Man, I wanted to leave so quickly because I was so embarrassed.
Those of you who don't know who Carissa is, she was the driver in my most recent video of the Arma Vendetta. That's Correct. Carissa driving.
Yes.
She's up the counters usually on Saturdays or here racing. So
yes.
Very knowledgeable.
Nice. I don't know if it was. I don't remember what day it was, but she was.
This story has been brought up throughout the years.
Oh, she never lets me forget
this. Because that's kind of when Olan started becoming Olan. Yeah. He was coming around more, and we all kind of started hanging out with Olan, and after you got that build out of the way, game on after that.
Yeah.
We don't even know how many cars he's built now.
Oh no, way more. I'm not gonna say I'm perfect. I do make mistakes.
That's true.
Usually when I'm drinking adult beverages, I do things backwards, or when I'm rushing.
Definitely wasn't his last kit mistake. I've definitely cleaned up a couple.
Couple. I'm not perfect. I'll admit I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I'm human.
So at this point, it was game on. You built your first car.
I built my first car. The only thing that I didn't have in my first car was I didn't realize that there was a timing system.
Racing. Now we're thinking about racing.
Right, because they're in the back of now. I will say this: Chris is a really good motivator. He can talk you up to make you feel like you're the king of the castle. And so he pumping me up like you can do it, this and the other. You've been coming here, just try it.
You got the car. You've been practicing.
I've been practicing.
Why aren't you out on that track?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. That's pretty much what he's saying. So I'm like, oh, I'm good. When's the next race? I'll show up and I'll be there. I show up for the first race, and it's packed.
100 people racing.
Man, listen, it's packed. There's tents everywhere. There's people everywhere. Man, listen. So I pull in the parking lot because I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm pumping myself up like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Like little inching that could. I'm going for it. Yeah. So I pull in the driveway. There's nowhere to pit anywhere. So I'm like, oh, I'll just go inside. It's packed inside. I don't remember if it was back when, I don't know if you remember when they used to do the cone races.
Yeah.
It used to be like...
It's just basically a large series race. It was one of our larger events. So
correct.
It was a lot of people.
Yeah, and it was split out between I think 3 or 4 tracks.
To be honest, probably not the best race to be your first, but...
Definitely not. I learned that the hard way.
You were here.
Yeah. So, let me back up. When they said the next race, I'm thinking it's just like a local club racers. Some of the people that I start to get familiar with would be there, and a couple other people that I saw from the year before out there. I'm thinking it'd be those people. No, it's people from all over. I'm looking at plates from Florida, Pennsylvania, Jersey, New York.
Yeah, there's quite a few people traveling.
Yeah, and then not only do you see the pop-up tents, but you see grills.
Oh yeah, full on tailgating.
Yeah, and then in the backside there was Winnebagos.
Oh, people are camping out too?
Yeah.
Sure.
So, I'm like, these guys must be I'm like, okay, this is not the race for me. Because, I'm seeing, banners from, all over. And I'm seeing guys with matching shirts. And I'm seeing, the nitro cars. I'm like, okay.
Whoa.
This is not the race for me. So.
Did you run in it?
No. I did not run in it. I was so intimidated.
Checked it out.
Oh, I just hung out for the day, and then after everybody left, I did my thing on the dirt track, and back up, I didn't realize that there was a timing system. So the transponder, I didn't have one of those yet because I didn't know that's what I needed to participate in the racing. So I'm like, I don't have one of those. I can't do it anyway, so I just sat and watched. So I was like, okay, that's not something I can afford to do right now. So I'll just wait. And I think this is around the time that I met Greg Fleshing, and him and Kevin. It might not have been Kevin at the time, but it was definitely Greg and a couple of his people. And I've been talking to him, kind of starting to get
cool dude.
Yeah, trying to get warmed up. He was like, "Hey, I got one you want to use." I'm like, "Nah." He's like, "Well, come out there. You can race with me." I'm like, "No, I'm good." So anyway, I didn't run that race. I was just like, I was way too intimidated because it was way faster than I was ready for. My confidence wasn't there yet. And I think that's the other thing that scares people off is thinking that you're going to be running with those good guys, not realizing that there's different tiers and the timing system will place you where you need to be.
Right, we talked about that in, I don't remember, episode 2?
Yeah, I think episode 2.
Yeah, so episode 2 we ran you through the racing and stuff, so check that out if you're not really sure. But yeah, the timing system and the transponders and
correct.
You jumped in right at a big show though, so
yeah.
So if you are thinking about getting into racing, we do have a schedule. Definitely want to jump into a club race like we were talking. Tuesday nights, Friday nights.
Definitely.
Way more laid back.
Well, the only problem with that was I wasn't running inside yet. I thought
they were. Yeah, I don't know what. I think they were running regularly on Sundays out there at that point.
They were.
But that happened to be a Sunday event.
Correct. And I didn't realize that there was other racing inside. Well, I saw the track in here when I would come in to buy parts, but
didn't know about that yet.
I didn't know about that either. And I was just assuming that I could take the car that I run out there and run it in here.
Oh, no.
No.
Big no-no.
Right. So, I couldn't do that, so I was like, okay. That was a waste of money. Not realizing that these guys have more than one car. So I'm thinking it's the same car that they're running everywhere, outside, inside. Not the case. So that's when I start realizing that there's different classes and different races. So I paused on the 8 scale because I didn't have the timing system. So I went and bought a Losi SCTE.
Short horse truck?
Short course truck.
Okay.
And I bought that used. I think it was on the counter. Yeah, I think that was a car that I bought on the counter or whatever like that. So anyway, I started running that, and that was more my pace because it was easier to control. It wasn't as powerful, and I could run that outside or inside.
Right, so that's good. Now you don't need something with a ridiculous amount of power.
No.
It's much more fun with a little less power, right?
It is, and like I was saying, I could control it better. So driving that car, it taught me throttle control. Even though the 8 scale buggy had that, it was so overpowered that you couldn't hit that thing full wick on any part of this track because it would just go all over the place. And I didn't realize you could gear it down or gear it up or any of that stuff yet. I was still just what came in the box, I pretty much just put it in there and just went. I didn't change out the springs or change out the oils. I didn't know any of that stuff yet. I was still learning the hobby. So, talking with those guys, they kind of just took me under their wing and just
taught you all the little bits and gearing and shock oil
and
tires and
all that other stuff. And then we got to the point where they taught me about inside on the carpet. So then
they're trying to get you into other forms of racing now.
Correct.
That they're basically you were hooking up with friends at the track.
Correct.
You had friends that were trying to get you in to do other things with
Correct.
them.
Right. So on top of that, they were teaching me about the different races, and it was starting to become fall. So the dirt track.
Something inside.
Correct. So again, I was thinking, I originally thought that I could just use the 8 scale buggy inside, not the case. It looked the same as what I saw online, but it's not the same. It was smaller. So that's when I started, like you said, I learning about different classes and different scales. So the 8 scale buggy and then the 10 scale. So that's when I bought the low C SCTE.
Short course was pretty big at the time.
Correct.
We weren't running buggy at that.
No.
Then.
It was the
short course, slashes,
yeah.
SCT,
and there was
triple X's.
There was a couple other cars that they were running, but I figured the short course I could do. So I bought that used and I ran it for a little bit, and then I started coming on Tuesday nights.
Is that when we just started buggies, right? Buggies had just made a comeback.
Yeah.
Tuesday nights is when we started. Tuesday nights when buggies kind of died for a while.
They did.
And then they came back out. I think TLR, the low seat TLR 22 came out, and then Associated came back on board, and Hobby Pro.
Correct.
That's when we started the whole Tuesday night scene. So at this point, you build a kit or two, and
correct.
You're kind of feeling it around. You're into the racing.
Right.
You're feeling it.
I am, and they had this introductory course. It was what was those things? It was the low C. It's like a desert truck.
You bought a 20. You bought no 20. Low C 8T.
No,
Mini.
And it wasn't that. It was a 2-wheel drive.
That's the triple X SUV.
Yes.
Yeah, we raced those for a little while.
Right.
Yep. Okay.
And with those, they came with everything.
We raced the box stock class of the triple X
Correct.
SUV for a while.
So I had that.
Yeah.
That was the first race car that I actually bought, and I was using people's transponders.
I think at that point we still had some house transponders, the ones where you put a little hole in the body and you popped it up through with a body clip.
Yeah.
We were still using those for a little while.
Right, but at the time I think Greg let me use one of his extra. So it was just in my car the whole time until I was able to buy one.
Right.
I think I might have bought one from him. I don't remember, but
you ended up with one.
Yeah, and from there it just
the rest is history.
Yeah.
So, basically, Olan's story is pretty similar to a lot of stories that I hear on a regular basis.
Sorry for the long version.
It's definitely the roundabout version. We're talking about motorcycle burnouts and
right.
Tyco turbo hoppers.
Oh yeah.
But I liked it though. It was good. It's good for people to hear that they're not alone in their adventure, because I'm sure that happens quite a bit. So I had Olan, not for any hobby shop around here, I had Olan just come to the counter
and asked
and struck up a conversation about building a car or this car or this just general curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
He would have skipped quite a few years worth of trial and error.
Oh yeah, definitely. So,
and I want to circle back before you, and not even skipping the trial and error and just jumping into racing. How intimidating was it to actually race? Not, granted, you came at that large race. Skipping that
right.
large race, that was a whoops.
Right.
Probably don't recommend doing that.
No, definitely.
You jumped into your first club race.
That was the best thing I ever did, and what made it so much easier, it was the group of guys that I was running with.
Finding a good group, but the only way you're gonna find a good group of guys is by asking the questions.
That's the thing. Like, you have to come out of that shell. Because
nobody's just, aside from Steve helping you that day, but for the majority, nobody's just going to come up and just start hanging out with it. You know what I mean?
No.
It starts with a question, hey, how do you do this? Right. And it goes with, oh, man, I saw your car doing that on the track. Just generally building a relationship with somebody.
Correct. And the relationship is another thing, and not making the new people feel like they're scum or they don't belong. So, before I even became friends with anybody, they were just, willing to, answer questions and, make me feel like I'm not alone, and they all went through this, and the only way you're going to get better is, by opening your mouth.
I can't even think back how we became friends, to be honest with you.
Me breaking a lot of stuff, and you helping me behind the counter.
Just helping them, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, that's...
Just slowly, and then look at us now, we're on TV together, we're famous. Yeah. We're famous together now.
I'm still working on that sponsorship thing, but,
Yeah, me too.
It might happen someday.
But yeah, so just a real good story of 0 to...
I ain't gonna say hero. Far from hero.
I was gonna say just being on a YouTube podcast.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Ain't no hero. I was pushing it.
Well, Hold on, I am kind of a hero. I am a legend. I'm speed.
Oh, a hero and a legend.
I am kind of a legend. I'm the.
He wasn't going to call himself that, but now he's a legend.
Oh, I'm definitely going to call myself a legend. So, the reason I call myself a legend is I was able to build a car that went 100 miles per hour from driveway to driveway, 350 feet.
He did do it.
The person that was running the gun at the time, I think there was a gun malfunction, and I really think I hit 100, and somebody screwed up.
I believe I let go of the button a little early, hit 97, but I'll give it to him. The car was still pulling.
It was definitely still pulling, and it was like the perfect day.
That was before the infractions and all that stuff too. So
yes.
That was big. No, this was not 8S either. This was 6S and stuff.
Correct. It was definitely 6S.
That's right. But that goes to show Olan is not scared to build anything at this point.
No.
Anything new comes out, want to build one of those. Or he's built. We got rock crawlers, speed runs, buggies, truggies, A-scale, turf cars.
On-road cars.
The only thing Olan does really mess with is flying too much.
No.
I don't really much either. But he's gone from buying used cars in the parking lot, have no idea what the hell's going on.
Not a joint.
To, really being able to answer questions for everybody else now.
Oh, yeah.
Now you've become that guy.
Yeah. But full circle.
Full circle.
It's crazy because, like, once I don't want to say, like...
Once you stopped being nervous about it and just started doing it.
It wasn't sort of nervous because I think the nervousness was a good thing. It kind of humbled me a little bit. It made me not want to go, like, full bore and, like, do things that I didn't know.
You were cautious. You were cautious.
Right. I wasn't comfortable.
Cautious.
Right. I was too cautious. So I would say, like, you have to be somewhat comfortable in your ability. Because, like, if you don't think that you could run with these guys, you know, you have to have some sort of, like, a little bit of, like, cockiness to yourself, but not, like, too much, but just enough to be, like,
but you can still go out and run with them and be respectful, though, too.
You can. And that's the thing. Like, I don't think there's...
They know... So, at least the guys that are here, like, when I'm out on the driver's stand, I know who is a good driver, and I know... You know, who I can kind of mess with a little bit. And I also know there's someone new on the stand.
Right.
And that if they bump my car or if they do something weird, I don't get mad about it because I'll be like, hey, man, don't put your car down right there on the track. Right. Or if your car's jumping like this, give him a pointer, blah, blah, blah. Right. But if my buddy's up there racing, he smacks into me, I'm gonna give him hell.
Oh, yeah.
Me and Olan are up there practice.
All the time.
Olan knows how to run on the track.
Right.
But you got to know who you're driving with too, and the person on the track, had they been here a while, knows who they're driving with as well. Right. So if they invite you out on the track, they know you're probably not the best. They know you're new.
Correct.
They just want to get someone else into the hobby.
Right.
That's all I do. I know you're not going to go out there and shatter the track record.
No, you're not going to get a
just trying to get you less nervous on the track.
The first time, no. And there was one thing that somebody told me a long time ago. They said, "Run your race, and I will find a way to pass you." You know what I mean? So, like, if you're going, don't think that you have to move out of my way, because that's going to make both of us crash. Because if I'm going down...
Stay predictable.
Right. So, the better guys, they already learned your driving habits. So, they know when you go into a corner that you're not going to hug the pipe. You're going to go a little bit wide, and they're going to take that inside road. Or you might over-jump a jump, and they'll under-jump it. So when you're still in the air, they're landing and they hit it and go. Like, they'll find a way to pass you because they've been doing it that much longer. So they know your weaknesses.
You're right.
So, and that was the one thing that somebody taught me. So I was like, oh, okay. Because I kept, like, whenever I saw, like, a fast guy coming, I would automatically pull over to the side.
Swerve or try to get out of the way.
Right, and that would mess them up because they're assuming...
on hitting you, or passing you. Sorry.
Correct, because they're assuming that I'm going to stay wide and they're going to take the inside corner or the outside corner and go. But when I pull over... It just... Now, there's spots to pull over on the track. So if there's like a big sweeper, you can go a little wide to the outside and give them the inside so they can go.
This is all stuff you've learned over the time.
Yeah.
And if you are willing to talk to the other people on the stand, it goes back to asking questions, they'll tell you. Like if somebody asks me and they're new, you know, what's the best way for someone to pass me or this? I'll be like, just keep driving and go. And then either say, I'm going to go a little wide here, or just do it and they'll pass you.
Oh, they'll find a way. Because, like, in the first couple of club races that I was doing, like, I was, you know, like I said, I kept pulling over. But these guys are, like, you know, we were bobbling, and I kept yelling out, like, I'm sorry. And they're like, just race. Just do your thing, and I will And I could never get that concept until I finally just like, you know what? Instead of trying to be that timid guy that just kept pulling over, just like try and run with them and try to make less mistakes. So, I would try to follow the car in front of me. So now it's kind of a bad habit, but I always like to chase. I never like to lead because I learned my driving style is a chaser. So like I'll chase you and then I'll wait for you to mess up and then I'll pass you. I was never like the guy that liked to go out front. So hence why I always like starting in the back of the race because like I watch the cars in front of me and I start to figure out what they're predictable to almost a certain point. Their driving habits. So I'll use their driving habits to get against them. Now, granted, I'm not the.
Look at Olan's professional.
Listen, I'm not a professional driver at any point.
Passing. I just wait for them to mess up.
I still make mistakes.
Smoke them.
Yeah, because I was watching my race on Tuesday night and I just saw like a couple corners that I thought I was killing it. No, like I was going wide.
There's always somebody faster. I tell you that much. But yeah, not to get too technical in the racing, but
no.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's pretty much Olin's story. I think, yeah, pretty much.
Pretty much, and then I get haggled.
Oh, of course, we have to now. Well, now he's friends with everybody. Everybody knows Olan.
Oh yeah,
he's basically family around here now.
Yeah.
And just to show you the progression of not knowing anything to basically being family, and just to do a recap. Take it easy when you're buying things used. Know what you're looking at. If you're not comfortable buying something used, don't buy something used because you're probably going to mess it up. No offense to anybody's buying something used. And if you are, meet here, have us look at it. I don't care. I'll look at it. And then just in general, don't be afraid to ask questions. That's the moral of the story, really.
Yeah.
Don't be too nervous. People are usually willing to talk about RC cars when they're at the RC track.
Oh yeah,
believe it or not. We all have a common interest.
Yeah. And was the craziest?
We want to talk about them.
The other crazy thing about it, like I've met so many people here that I see like at their real jobs.
Yeah, and you have no idea. Idea.
I never so.
Doesn't seem to be something people talk about outside of the RC track.
Oh, it definitely is. So, I don't know if anybody. I don't want to take too much time, but I'm a Honda guy. I love Hondas.
Okay.
So, when I first started racing here, I met some people. And Honda and West Springfield, a lot of the guys that were working on my cars would race here. And it was just like so crazy. They'd be like, we would always see your cars in your trunk and wonder like who you are. And because I'm not going to say my full name, but they would never know that my full name was me.
Yeah.
So it's just like, because they never put the 2 and 2 together.
Gotcha.
Until like we actually started. And they were like, we always wondered whose car that was with all those RC stuff in.
You'd be surprised, man.
It's a small but large community.
Yeah, and just people love talking about their toy cars.
They love it.
So don't be afraid. Don't be nervous. By asking questions and whatever to people at the counter around, you can skip quite a few years of hassle, as you can see from Olin's story of just kind of being a little nervous there. And you'll generally just have more fun because you'll know what's going on.
Mm-hmm. And you can always learn from other people's mistakes.
And you don't have to buy something to come ask me a question up at the shop either. You can ask me, what's this kit? How much does it cost? What's this? What's that? I'll buy it. You don't have to buy it. I mean,
no, you can ask your opinion. It's
appreciated that you do. But
yeah, you can ask for an opinion. Like, hey, I'm new. What should I get? And the other thing that I realize is like people like, hey, can I buy one of those cars that are on the floor? I'm like, yeah, you can, but know what you're buying before you buy it. Because like just because you see it, and there was the thing that I had to learn myself, like just because you see somebody else that's good with it doesn't mean that it's meant for you. Like there's different.
You definitely got to try everything.
You do, but you still have to stick to like what you're not. I'm not gonna say what you're good at, but don't try to be like the veterans right off the gate.
Yeah, some guys have been doing it for 20 years.
Exactly.
And they're whipping it around.
Exactly. And
you'll get there.
I don't know about that.
Olin didn't, but
definitely won't. I'm good. I just like.
No, he's not.
I just like having fun and laughing.
It's all about having fun.
It's definitely
all about having fun and asking questions.
Yeah, I think once you take the fun out of it, it's.
Well, it's supposed to be fun. They're toy cars.
I know, but some people take it way too seriously.
Well, that's a different podcast.
Yes. I don't know if I'll be back for that one. I might have like over talked and
This is a great story, I think, and I appreciate you having you on.
I appreciate you.
Olan will be back, guys. Olan will be back.
I don't know. I think like once I become YouTube famous, I'm gonna retire.
He's probably gonna get too famous. He's a legend. So
I don't know about the legend. I was just joking.
But anyway,
I kind of want to do another speedrun car though.
Speedrun build on the channel.
I think we should.
Do got some cool builds coming up, guys. Check that out if you guys are still listening.
Yeah.
But anyway, thanks for coming on the show, Olan.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for the support. Hit us up if you got any questions or future episodes, or if you got something you want to talk about. We can talk about having you on the show.
Yes.
Tyler P should be back next week. I think we're going to talk about electronics, batteries, and what combos go with what, and blah, blah, blah. All about electronics.
I might pop up.
Olan may be here. We do have the equipment to run a third person. I just got to figure out the camera angle.
I can stand in the background.
Olan's going to stand in the back. No, we'll have him on.
Yeah.
But,
if you guys don't mind.
Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next show.